There we go. Okay, so this is the library homepage. If you haven't seen it before, many of our resources are available online. There are, of course, materials physically in the library as well. There's study rooms and study spaces, but a lot of it can be found online, which is why we can do a session like this in a room with computers. The thing I want to point out, first of all, the most important thing, if you forget everything else I talk about today, is under the quick links section, there's a link to contact us. If I talk about something today that you think is really neat, but you can't remember how to get back to it, you can always come and ask. If I don't answer questions that you have, if there's something that you leave that you wish I'd talked about, you can, of course, again, come and ask. Our chat service is now 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so anytime, day or night, you can talk to a librarian and figure out what you're looking for, get help searching for those really difficult statistics or those numbers or an article that you're having trouble digging up. You can definitely do chat. Of course, you can come and talk in person at the library as well. We love to see you, but I know it's not always convenient. For social work, for nursing, you might be on a rotation that's not in Columbia. So if that's the case, please do feel free to contact us online. There also is this yellow tab here for subject librarians. The trick to navigating our website is yellow tabs. There are yellow tabs everywhere. Librarians are not web designers, unfortunately. So we tend to put lots of different information on pages and then hide it all under yellow tabs. So anytime you go to a page, look for those. They're probably going to be everywhere. And in this case, the important one is subject librarians. My name is Kimberly Moeller, and I work with a lot of the social sciences. So for those of you that are in social work or in counseling or education psychology, those are disciplines that I work with. I also work with psychology, women and gender studies, library science, and a few others. But this list here will tell you who the correct librarian is that's the expert in your subject area. So I know we have some people that said nursing, someone said engineering. So for engineering, Noelle Capriva would be the right person to contact. And of course, there is a phone number and email. You absolutely can set up appointments with us. We love to meet with you in person, especially if you're working on a project like your dissertation or a thesis or a research project as a faculty member. We meet a lot with people doing those types of work, especially when they're writing the literature review part of an article or a dissertation. So please do feel free to contact. We meet both in person and online. This year, for the first time, we're on MU Connect. So if you've ever looked at MU Connect, it's how you make appointments with counselors, with your advisor, your academic advisor, and now with a librarian as well. So this would tell you who your contact would be, and then you could either email or go on MU Connect to schedule an appointment. So again, that contact us link is kind of the first thing that I would always look to as the most important library resources. We're going to be talking about a lot of resources today, and I wanted to make sure to emphasize that the people who work here are often some of the best resources. The library has so much to offer, and it's not always very easy to find. So the people are going to be the way to help navigate and find that information. Okay, so when you think of a library, what do you think a library offers? Information, yes, what else? This isn't a trick question or something that's supposed to be a surprise, but what do you think of when you think of libraries? Books, absolutely. Books, information, anything else? Davis? Yeah.
Books and articles.
Books and articles, yes.
Databases.
Databases, absolutely. So a lot of these are physical or electronic pieces of information, right? So we'll take a look at those first. This gray box in the middle of the page, it's like the library's version of Google. It's going to find a little bit of everything. It'll find books, articles, data sets, magazine and journals, newspapers. So if you're in journalism and you're looking at newspapers, this is also a good way to find it. It does find a little bit of everything, but it's not comprehensive. It doesn't have everything the library does. It only looks at about 40 different sources. You have access to over 400 databases. So it's just a small portion, but it is a good place to start. So I do want to take a quick look at that. I'm going to use the example of health and chocolate because I like rationalizing why I eat chocolate. Can't talk and spell at the same time, but hopefully that works. Okay. So you'll see we have a lot of resources. You get the number of results here, and each one's a little bit different. There's an ebook, there's a physical book. Apparently we have a video recording or DVD, If we scroll down further, we'll start seeing academic journal articles, reports. There's a lot of information here to work with. I do want to point out this left-hand column lets you refine those results a little bit more. For many of your courses, or if you're writing your dissertation, you're restricted to peer-reviewed articles. So if that is a requirement for your assignment, you can just check that box and everything left will be very academic in nature. So I think that's a good trick to know about. I'm not going to talk too much about running a search today just because there are other workshops geared toward that. Today is more of an introduction to what the library offers. So this is one way to search. You can use natural language just like you would on Google, and you can also learn about more refined searching in a later session. Okay, so going back to the home page, that's what the gray box has to offer. Now, it does have a little bit of everything, but if you are looking specifically for books, I would highly recommend going to this link down on the left-hand side, the classic catalog. This is going to be the best location for books, for materials that are physically in the library, and for ebooks. It does have a generic search, but it also has an advanced search. And I want to point this advanced search out. It lets you be more specific, but it also has additional limiters. And this is important because we have 9 libraries on this campus. Right now you're in one. It's the main one, especially for social sciences and humanities. But if you're in health sciences or nursing, the health sciences library is probably where most of your materials will be found. Journalism has its own library. Engineering has its own library. So there are a lot of different branches on campus that you might want to become familiar with. This is not the only one. So I do want to point out that's a part of your search. And when you run a search for a book, it's going to tell you which library to go to. But you can also pick which format. So if you prefer books, physical books, you can look for them that way. Or if you prefer ebooks because you're a distance learning student and you can't come on campus to pick up a book, that's absolutely an option as well. I also like to point out that there are DVDs at the library. We do have movies. We have Buffy the Vampire Slayer. If you want to watch something on the weekend or take a break, we do have those as well as academic materials. So the catalog is where you go to find all that physical stuff. Are there any questions so far about searching for these things? Okay. So that's the catalog. I am going to run a search really quickly, again, for our chocolate and health. Chocolate and health. And I want to make sure I didn't click both DVD and ebooks because, of course, that's going to confuse the search since those are different things. All right, so we'll go with any and hit submit. So you can see what some of these records look like. Seems to be running a bit slowly today, but here's a couple good examples. Each one of these links, each one of these items is going to tell you 3 important pieces of information. The first is where it can be found. This first book, Chocolate and Health and Nutrition, is in the Health Sciences Library, so it's not in this building. I would need to go to a different library to find it. This one is online, so I could access it on my computer, on a smartphone, on a tablet, an iPad. This one, however, is in the library, the current building that you are in. So that location is kind of the first piece to look at. The second piece to look at is the status. Is it available? Does someone else already have it? This happens a lot, especially at the beginning of the school year when people are looking for textbooks. We don't have a lot of textbooks, but the ones we do disappear very quickly because, let's face it, textbooks are really expensive. And so if you can get it from the library, most people do choose that option. So if it's checked out, you don't want to go and look for it because it won't be there. The third part is the call number. This number tells you where in the building to go. For those of you that are in this room, you know our library is a bit of a maze. That's not you, it's the building. The building is confusing. So knowing where to go in the building is very helpful. We have 4 floors. There are east, west, and central stacks. And there's also a ground floor below that where the cafe is. So really there's kind of 5 floors. So you do want to know the location to go to. Once you have this call number, if you're in the building, there are little yellow pieces of paper floating around at reference desk, circulation desk, by the staircase, and this kind of will tell you what that number means and where to go once you have it. You also can click on the location. So this one's QP. Keep that in mind, QP. If I click on the location, it's going to tell me what that means. Here are all my letters. I'm looking for Q alphabetically, QP. QP is going to be down here between QL and QR. That's into Central. There's even a video that you can watch to show you how to get to Central if you're not familiar, or you can ask for directions. Like I said, our building's complicated. It's not you, so feel free to ask. You're not the only person doing so. Okay, questions on that so far? What if a book isn't available? Let's see if I can find one that is this one. This one's checked out. I don't know what it has to do with chocolate and health, so that's a bit odd to come up in my search, but we'll use it as an example anyway. It says it's due in December. That's a really long time away. My paper that I want it for probably is due before December. So what should I do? Does anyone know? Request. Yes, there's a little button that says request. If you request it, there are a couple things that happen. If the book is in the building, so if it's this one that's not checked out and I hit request, it'll come down to the circulation desk and I can just pick it up there. I don't have to wander around the building looking for it. However, if it's checked out and I request it, it's going to see if there's another library that has it. I think it's a little easier if you go into the title. If you click the title, it'll open up the whole record for the book. So you can find out more about it before you decide if you actually want it, more than just the title. So I can see the abstract, a bit of a summary about what the book's about, what each chapter title is, so why maybe it came up even though it doesn't make sense. And then there's this button called Search Mobius. Mobius is the name of our partnership with other libraries in Missouri. If our campus doesn't have a book you want, this Mobius button will come up as well. So if I had searched for a specific title that we didn't have, the Search Mobius button will come up. It'll say, MU Libraries doesn't have this material, and then it'll have that Search Mobius button under it. So if we click Search Mobius, it's going to check and see what other books exist in Missouri from libraries that we can borrow from. You can see that there is the book here, and then when we scroll down to the bottom, we can see there are 2 libraries that have it. One of them's ours, that's the one that's checked out, but there's another one, and it is available, so we can request that. So the Request It button, and all of this is free for you. If we don't have a material, if we don't have a book or an article that you want, we will get it for you from another library, and that's completely free. You do not have to pay for that. So for books, that's the avenue you would go. I am going to go back to the library homepage. For articles, if we don't have a book, Mobius is where we go to look first. If it's not in Mobius or if it's an article, the place that we get it from is called Interlibrary Loan. On the homepage, that's this ILL at MU. Request an item, ILL at MU. That's the link that you would go to if we don't have a resource. Now, it might come up in a search, and usually what it happens is if you're looking for an article, there'll be a big black bold text that says this item is not available at MU. But below that will be a link that says request a copy. It goes to the exact same place. So if you see anything that says MU doesn't have what you're looking for, look instead, there's going to be a link on that page that says request a copy, and it will take you to this interlibrary loan form, and we'll get it for you from somewhere else. Are there questions about that? Yes?
When you order a book, sometimes you say you have less 2 holds for
If it says 2 holds, it means there's 2 people waiting in line to get it. So this is common for a book that's a textbook, for example. A lot of people want it. So one person's checked it out, then one person puts a request on it, they become the first hold. The second person that puts a request on it is the second hold. So it just depends on how many people are in line waiting for it. Right. No. So if a book is on hold, you cannot renew it. If no one else wants the book and you want to keep it for a semester, as graduate students, as faculty and staff, you get books for 4 months. It's a 4-month checkout period. And you can renew that online. So you can technically have it for up to a year. Or it might even be 2 years now. I think we extended it. So you can renew it, I think, 5 times now. So you can have it for a very long time. If you're working on your dissertation and you need a material for a very long time and no one else needs it, you can keep it for almost as long as you need. And I'll show you how to renew it. But if someone else does have a hold on it, if someone else needs it, you can't renew it. It does have to come back. Yes?
What if sometimes if you borrow a book from the library, I'm supposed to stay with you for like 4 months, and you just get an email within 2 days and you return it in 2 weeks?
That's a very odd circumstance. So usually what happens is a professor has noted that it is a course book, and the professor who has that course has asked for it back, and then they put it on reserve, so it's a shorter checkout period. So when this usually happens is a professor will know there's a textbook for the class, someone will have checked it out before the semester starts because they see their reading list. The professor will ask the library to call it back, and then they'll put it on reserve so it can be only checked out for maybe 2 hours at a time. So everyone in the class will have access. So that doesn't happen very often, but it will happen occasionally, especially if it's a highly demanded book for a course.
So does that mean the person can be using this in the library, but not to take it on the supposed to like that?
Yes.
To reserve it in the library?
Yes. Yes. So professors do that often. They'll put a book, it's called on reserve. I was going to talk about this a little bit later, but we can talk about it now. For some courses, if there's a book or a DVD they know that many people will want access to, they put it on reserve, and that's the circulation desk. It's the same thing. It's where you go to check out materials, but the book stays behind that counter. So you go up and ask for it. It's usually under the professor's last name, and then it's a short period of a checkout. Instead of having it for 4 months, you might only have it for 2 hours, or you might have it for a week, depending on the professor and how many people they think are going to want the material. So it just depends on what the professor requests. And usually the reason they can do that is the textbook is bought with their course's money and the grant money they have for teaching. So technically, it's not the library's copy.
So is it not possible for the library to get more than a copy of such a book?
For textbooks, no. We don't, because there are about 2,000 courses offered at the University of Missouri, and many of them have more than one textbook associated with it. And we don't have the money to buy even one copy for each course, much less a copy for everyone in the class. So no, we typically don't carry any textbooks. Occasionally we will, because people, professors have very key books in the field, books that are really well known in the field, and so we get a copy of that because it's really well known and it's kind of critical for research, but it's not because we bought it for a textbook. Are there other questions about textbooks or about reserves? Okay, and then since we are talking about renewing, if you could renew, there's this, so the library's website is divided kind of into 5 sections. There's this gray bar across the top that has a lot of drop-down lists. There's the search box in the middle that we talked about. There are these quick links at the bottom. There's kind of other quick links that don't have a label, but they're really frequently asked questions. And then there's our blog. So across the top, I'm going to go through a couple of these drop-down lists. One of them is libraries. I mentioned that there are 9 libraries on campus. You'll notice there are more than 9 links. It's because some of these are collections within a library. For example, Special Collections is on the 4th floor of this building. So it's not technically a separate library, but it is a separate unit. And it does have different materials. So that's kind of where all of these are. You can see what hours they're open and where they're located on campus under this drop-down link. I do think it's important to note because MU Digital Collections is going to be very relevant for, I think, everyone in this room. We have 2 different digital collections. One is a library where we scan materials we have that don't exist hardly anywhere else in the world so that other people can access them as well. The one you'll really be interested in is MoSpace, though. MoSpace is a collection of things that are written and produced and created at MU. They're created by our faculty and they're created by our graduate students typically. There are a few undergraduate programs as well. But there are dissertations in MoSpace. This is where we house all of the dissertations that are published by our graduate students. So if you want an example of a dissertation that someone in your department has written, this is a good place to go. You can check and see what the formatting looks like and kind of what's expected in your department and what other people who have successfully defended their thesis or dissertation have done. So it's a good place for that. It also is a good place to have your dissertation once you've written it, or have an article once you've written it for an academic journal, published online. The links are consistent. They will always be available. We do constantly update our system so the links don't break, and they're findable on Google Scholar and on Google. So people will come across your dissertation or your articles. They'll read it, they'll see your research, they'll cite it, which in the academic world is considered pretty important. People will be able to find your research that you've done, which again is pretty important. The other positive for this is when you publish in an academic journal, it costs money then to get it again and read it. Academic journals are expensive. If you put it on MoSpace before it's published in the journal, they'll change the formatting a little bit, but the HTML or the Word document file will still be available for free for everyone else who wants to read it. So your citation count goes up because even people that aren't paying for that journal can still access your article, and it doesn't violate copyright. So it's definitely worthwhile looking into. This isn't just for papers, it is also for posters. If you present at a conference and you want your presentation to be recorded, or you want to have your poster presentation included, it does have all of that. I put one in here as an example, that's mine. So I'll show you what that looks like really quickly. In graduate school, I did a poster at a conference on romance novels and why people don't come to libraries to get romance novels. So I thought it was a fun one to put up. So you can see it does have a little bit of detail about what this poster was, and then there is a link to open it up. This is findable on Google Scholar. Other people have used it since, which I was a little surprised about, but it's true. And let's see if it's opening up here. Yes, download. And there it is. There's my poster. So it's actually a really nice format. They can scan it. This was one of those giant posters that you see at conferences if you've been to one, and they scan it into a pretty nice, presentable looking file format. So I'm going to close that. I don't know if the people online can see this since that's not a shared application, but if you were to, I know you can see the URL. If you wanted to go back later, you can pursue my romance poster. Yes?
So what's the process of making a poster?
Can you repeat the question?
Okay, so the question was, what's the process of taking a poster you've created and getting it into a format like the one online? There are a couple ways you can do this. Usually when you create a poster, you have the file saved somewhere if you've created it online. So then you just send the file to Felicity Dykes, who is the person who is our head of MoSpace and puts all of these things online so that they are findable. So you would send it to her and then she would upload it. Or if you only have the physical copy, you can bring it to the library and we will scan it for you. We do have giant flatbed scanners that process some of those really giant old books. Old books that you see from medieval times are gigantic. It has to do with the process of making parchment rather than paper, but they were very large. So when we try to scan those in and upload digital files, we do have some very large machines that can do that. So I do think MoSpace is one of the really wonderful things that the libraries can offer to graduate students and to faculty. So I do want to highlight that. And as I just mentioned, Felicity Dykes is the contact person for that. And I can give you her contact information if you would like at the end of the session. So that's the library's drop-down link. Class resources has a number of other really useful links under it. I do want you to play around with this on a later date. I'm not going to have a chance to go through all of these URLs and all of these links. A few of them probably are most useful. Cite sources being one of them. Citation formats is something that will come up a lot, especially as you're creating long bibliographies for literature review, for a dissertation or thesis. And what I want to point out here actually are citation managers and tools. Mendeley, EndNote, and Zotero are the three citation management tools that are supported at the University of Missouri. I highly recommend looking into one of these and using them. EndNote is pretty heavily science-based. You're going to see a lot more of that in chemistry, in physics, and some biology. Mendeley and Zotero are used a lot more in the social sciences and humanities, mainly because they share more easily. They play nicely with each other. So if you're working with someone else and you're co-authoring a paper, you can collaborate more easily, I think, through Mendeley. So the reason they're useful is they build your bibliography for you, your works cited page for you. You've done your research. Whenever you're finding an article, you just click a button. It exports it into Mendeley or EndNote or whichever one you choose. And then at the end, when you say, okay, well, I wound up using 53 of these articles, I'm just going to check off those 53 articles. You hit a button, and it creates your bibliography. And then you realize, oh, no, I created it in MLA, but I really needed an APA. You hit another button, and it switches it for you. This is really useful if you are submitting to different journals, and each journal has a different citation requirement. Some of them are very specific. EndNote is used in science because it has all those. There's like 80 different chemistry citation formats. EndNote has all of them. It literally has over 3,000 different styles of citation formats. They're very useful. They save you a lot of time. Most people that I know really dislike writing bibliographies, myself included. So I think it's a wonderful time saver and it makes your life a lot easier. So I wanted to highlight those. Okay, other things under class resources to touch on. If you are any of you a TA or any of you teaching a class? Couple hands. If you wanted to schedule a library class or have a librarian come to talk to your students about a research paper they're writing, you could do that under here as well. And then there are recordings of many different workshops that the library offers, including this one that's happening right now. It's being recorded and it will be uploaded to that link. Yes?
Quick question. Would there be a reason to choose Mendeley over Zotero or vice versa?
So the question is, would there be a reason to choose Mendeley or Zotero or vice versa? I personally like Mendeley because it does allow you to access it on other computers. So EndNote and Zotero download to your hard drive so you can access it on your computer, but not very easily on another computer. Zotero does a little bit, but Mendeley also has a web-based platform, so you can do it online on any computer, kind of like how Box or Dropbox operates. You can log in from any computer and use it. So I like Mendeley. I'm biased. Again, it really depends on the field you go into and which citation formats you require, though. For chemistry, EndNote's probably going to be the one you wind up using because it has those citation formats that are required. So I hope that answers the question. Other things in the library. So there are lots of places to study. You can reserve study rooms. And I also wanted to point out equipment lending. The library checks out a lot more than just books. And I think that surprises people. But we have umbrellas. If it's a rainy day and you want to check out an umbrella, you can. We check out phone chargers. So if your phone is dying when you're in the library, heaven forbid, you can check out a charger. I joke, but I've used it. So it is definitely worthwhile knowing about. There are cameras. So if you're in journalism and you want to make a documentary or you want to make an advertisement, a commercial, we do have cameras and recording equipment. We have sound equipment. Some of our study rooms have they're green rooms. Their walls are painted green so you can record. And then our computers have the software to do video editing. So you can do all of that in the library and change all of your backgrounds and do all the formatting that you need. So do know there's a lot to check out beyond just books. Office supplies, even like scissors and stuff. If there's something that you want to check out and we don't have, you can tell us and we'll probably get it. That's how we wound up with most of this. So do know there's a lot more to check out than just books, and there's a lot more in the library than just books. We have a variety of software and computing equipment. We have a 3D printer. I know in engineering this gets used a lot to make very specific pieces or gears that you can't necessarily buy or find because you need them to be sized exactly and have very exact measurements. So it does get used by engineering quite a bit. We have plotter printers, which are those things that print out the big posters you would use at conferences. It costs $10, but as students, you have a print quota. You're paying for it as part of your tuition anyway. So for you, it's kind of free. I mean, it's not because you've already paid the money, but if you're going to use your print quota, that's a really good way to do it. And $10 is significantly cheaper than if you go to Office Max or Office Depot. I think when I was looking at mine, it was something like $30, $35 to print it off at Office Max, or whichever one is at the corner of Providence and Broadway. Office Depot, thank you. It was $35 at Office Depot. It's $10 in the library. So we do have a lot of that equipment. Another one I want to point out is our scanners. We have some pretty large scanners by the reference desk that will digitize anything. I digitized baby pictures of my brother to make a slideshow and embarrass him at his wedding. So it will digitize pages of a book. If you find a book and you only have like 3 pages from it you need, scan it, send yourself the PDF, and then you have it saved as a file on your computer that you can access whenever you need it, as opposed to trying to check out the book again and again and again. Same thing if you get a textbook for 2 hours and you need the chapter, a specific chapter, scan in the chapter, and then you'll have it. Yes?
If we're in St. Louis, can we see what equipment UMSL has turned out?
Yes. So your borrowing card is your student ID card. It works at any college or university library in Missouri, whether it's part of the MU system or not. So UMSL, UMKC, Missouri Science and Technology, Those are the 4 campuses, so we do a lot more sharing than with some of the others. But if you're in St. Louis, you can also use SLU, you can use WashU. In Columbia College, and I don't think it works at DBRL at the public library, but it does work at Stevens College as well. There are a couple public libraries it works at too, but mostly it's college and university libraries. So if you're not in Columbia, yes, you still can check out materials from other campuses. The length of time you can check things out, though, depends on that library. So ours is 4 months. Usually it's somewhat like 3 weeks if it's not your home library. So it is different. I don't know about what technology other libraries have, though. I think they're all unique. Okay, so those are some of the things under there. Services for. I want to take a look very specifically at the services for graduate students because I think that is most relevant at the moment. One, this is just a funny comic strip, piled higher and deeper for PhD. If you're a PhD student, it's definitely realistic. And there are guides for people who are instructors. So if you're a TA or if you are teaching a course, there's a lot of material there on how to get support for curriculum development, for building reading lists, those sorts of things. And for researchers, which all of you in this room, I believe, are to some extent, here is kind of a list of all the things you might want to look at as a graduate student. We've talked a lot about doing the research aspect of it. Data management is a big part of that. A lot of grant money now, NSF and NIH, having a data management plan is required for writing those grants. So it's definitely worth checking out. Citation, we talked a little bit about. There's a plagiarism tutorial, so if you're a little fuzzy on what counts as plagiarism and copyright and where all of that belongs, it's worthwhile looking into. We talked about EndNote, Mendeley, and Zotero, so this is just another place to find those links, all the graduate stuff in one place. Your research impact, measuring and maximizing impact. This is important because as you continue in your academic career, it's something that universities look at. They'll look at it probably when you start interviewing for jobs. They look at it when you go up for tenure, and they look at it when you go up for promotion. It's checking to see, okay, how impactful is what you've done? Are people seeing it? Are people reading it? Are people interested? Are they using it? Is it important? Is what you've done important? And there's a number of ways to measure that. So it is important that you start off your academic career with an ID so that everything you ever write can be tied back to you. And there are a couple ways to do this. I think Google Scholar profiles are the ones people most know about. When you search on Google Scholar, if you click on the author's title, you can find everything they've written. It's like that. There are just a couple different ways to do it. So Google Scholar is one that I think is becoming more and more used. ORCID, so an ORCID ID, is also very useful. It's used in Web of Science and Scopus especially, but in a lot of other databases as well. And there are a few others here, but I think Google Scholar and ORCID are the two main ones that are important. There is a session at a later date on specifically how to maximize your research identity and make people find you, so that people will find your research. So that's one to look a little bit more closely at. There's a list of some of our workshops and a few other things, but those are the ones I think are most important to highlight. There is one of those links, I know, since we do have a couple of faculty and staff in the room as well. There is a link for faculty and staff. Again, there's stuff specifically for research and instruction. And it says extension faculty. I didn't click on this for just for graduate students either, because another one of those categories under services for is distance learners. Since some of you are, I believe, distance learners coming in from online, there's a specific guide that shows you kind of what you have access to and how to navigate if you're not in Columbia. There's how to request books. We do ship books to you. So if something is at our campus at Mizzou and you're located in St. Louis, we will ship you a book, or we'll send it to the closest library and you can pick it up there. Again, all of that is free. If it's shipped to you, though, you do have to ship it back. So sometimes having it sent to another library is a little bit better. How to find and request articles. Again, even if they are physical copies in our library, we will scan and deliver them to you that way via email. And that's true on campus too. If it's something that's from 1980, 1970, it's before the internet was really around, those articles are not going to be online. But if you want to have a PDF copy, you can just request that it be scanned and sent to you. More recordings and tutorials, again, workshops like this one, and troubleshooting. So if you have problems accessing and you can't come to an on-campus IT person, or you don't want to come to an on-campus IT person, troubleshooting is useful as well. The last one of those grade drop-down lists is My Account. All of these links kind of lead to the same place, but they all lead to what your account looks like. It's how to renew your books, it's how to place holds on books that you have, if someone else is checking it out. There's a lot of different things here. All of these you would log in to see the information about, but this is where you would go to renew your books as well. Okay, we've talked about that bar going across the top. We've talked about this search box, which is kind of like Google. Some of these links are repetitive because we do want people to be able to find them, and since our web page isn't designed that well, we put them in multiple places. Renewing your book is down here as well. Interlibrary loan, requesting items, down here as well. Reserving a study room, also here, but also under this in the library, under places to study. The classic catalog I already talked about, that's where you find books. So now we're going to get into some of these guides. All of these are course guide type things. I'm going to start off by looking at under a database because it's going to wind up taking us to the same place. So does anyone know what a database is? How would you define a database? A database is kind of where you find articles. That is a very general explanation. It has a lot, databases have a lot more in them. Some have data sets, some have newspapers, but generally they're going to be where you find academic articles. You can look it up by name. If you have the name of a specific database like JSTOR that you know and want to search, you can look it up by title, but we don't expect you to know all the databases that the library has access to. I don't know all the databases that the library has access to, so there are a lot of other ways to find it. Databases by type. If you're looking for newspapers, for example, this is a way to do it. How to search images, how to search for literary criticism, how to search for grants. This is how you would go about finding the type. But databases by subject, I think, is actually the most useful. Here's a list of a lot of the subjects that are taught here at the University of Missouri. I'm probably just going to wind up picking one. I think we had some people in counseling and education psychology, so I'm going to go to education. But I want you to notice there are a lot of different things here. There is engineering. Did you say civil engineering? Yeah. Civil engineering. So there is a guide that's specifically dedicated to that form of engineering as well. So you can kind of play around. However, I do want to point out, just because you belong to one department doesn't mean you should exclusively focus your research on that one department. If you're in counseling psychology, for example, you might look at education, you might look at psychology, you might look at social work or women and gender studies. It could be kind of around the board. It doesn't have to necessarily just be that one place. So we have a list of the databases that are most relevant to education. These top 3 are all very specifically education-based, and then we get to a few others that have broader impact. PsycInfo definitely overlaps with education, but has a lot on psychology. But the thing I want to point out is, I mentioned this earlier, yellow tabs. Librarians hide lots of things under yellow tabs. Right now, we're in a subject guide for education. All of these yellow tabs relate to education. So books, how to find books on education. Statistics, how to find statistics on education. Organizations about education. So each one of these subject areas is going to have different materials. Psychology, there's stuff on tests and measurements, how to find assessment measurements, because that's something that's relevant to psychology. So each of these is a little bit different. So back to the home page, I got to that particular guide by looking for a database, because each subject guide has a list of subject databases. But you can research by subject as well. You can look up those guides that I was just in multiple ways. Again, we try to make multiple access points. So you can come and say, okay, engineering and computer science, here are my guides for engineering and computer science. There's civil and environmental engineering, engineering research guides. So lots of different ways to find those exact same guides where lots of different resources are pooled together. Okay, back to the library homepage. Lots of clicking around. Course guides is the same thing. These are just developed for particular courses. So if your professor says there's a library guide for that particular class, it would be found under course guides. Course reserves is going to be reading lists. If your professor says the reading list is through the library, it's going to be under course reserves. You would log in through your professor's last name. Okay, other questions about that? Right. This section, again, is a repeat of some of the links we've already seen. Ask the Librarians is the same as Contact Us. Events, classes, and workshops. Those are the same workshops that are listed here under classes, workshops, and tours. Off-campus access, that's very similar to the distance learning page. Support the libraries is if you have money and you want to make a donation, so that's different and new. But I know as a graduate student, I didn't have money to give a library, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that. This picture, though, that's rotating is actually a link to our blog. I do want to show you this because I do think it's very relevant. The library's blog is called Library News, and it has a lot of information about what's going on at the library. Some of those things are workshops, like the one you're attending now. I don't actually know how most of you came across this workshop. Was it a flyer? Was it, so some flyers? How many of you saw it because of an email listserv? Email listserv? Did anyone see it because of this blog? Social media? Okay. Well, we do have flyers around campus, so definitely keep looking at those. It's good to know that different things are working and not everyone's coming from the same place, so that different marketing efforts are working. But if you want to have more of a consistent idea of what's happening at the library, our blog is the place to do it. It's going to tell you about workshops that we have coming up, different services. Right now, we're definitely dealing with budget issues, the whole campus is, so we're kind of navigating what journals we may be buying, what journals we may not be buying. So we're keeping people updated again through our blog. Events that are happening, I'm very excited about this one because I'm biased, I'm helping host it. We have a One Read program going on right now that I'll talk to you a little bit more about at the end as a part of a shameless plug that I'll be doing. But we're hoping that a lot of members of the MU community read the same book. It's called Infamy. It's about Japanese American internment during World War II. And it's part of a diversity One Read program that the law school started to get people talking about experiences beyond their own. So Dr. Hosokawa is one of the health sciences professors over in the School of Public Health, and he actually grew up in one of these internment camps. So he's going to be talking Wednesday at 1. And all of these events for One Read program, we also have lunch for. So if you come, you'll get lunch. But again, our blog will keep you apprised of all those things that are happening. And there's a lot every week that we're posting on here. So this is the post for the whole One Read. It talks about all the different events that we have. So I do think it's worthwhile looking at. If you don't want to follow a blog, there is Twitter, Facebook, and you can subscribe to a newsletter. We send about 1 email out a week with some of the posts that we've created over the week. You'll learn about whatever workshop is happening that Friday, because we do have a workshop every Friday this semester. You'll find out kind of what services are happening, what hours are changing, just some of the details of what we're doing and might be most specifically geared toward you. Questions about that? Oh, and you can sign up specifically to your library. So like if you're engineering, there will be specific things catering toward the engineering library. Okay, MU Library is home. All right. I only have about 4 minutes left, so I think I've covered everything that I was planning to talk about, but what questions do you have? This was a very brief introduction to the library, what it offers. I didn't get into any in-depth searching, but I do have a list of the other workshops that are available. This is online for those of you that are online as well. So the next workshop is going to be about writing literature reviews. And it is specifically for dissertations. It's writing a literature review for a dissertation and how to put that piece together. And it's taught by 2 of our librarians that have their PhD and have gone through this process and how they kind of stayed sane through that process. That's their description that they told me prior. The week after that, we have another workshop on literature reviews, but it's for how to write a literature review for an article, because that is significantly different than writing a literature review for a dissertation. So those are a little bit different from each other. On September 22nd, there's one on how to fact check and verify the news. I think this is very poignant right now, especially. There's all sorts of fake news and fear about fake news, and it's being taught by one of our journalism librarians who in the past has gone over how to tell if a photo's been doctored or if it was actually from the time and date when they said it was from, and how to dig a little bit deeper to see if an article you're reading is real or not. Special Collections has one on September 29th. I did mention that earlier. It's on the 4th floor in this building. That is a hands-on, in-person only session, but they do have some really neat materials. So if you've never been up there before, I highly recommend it. They have Babylonian clay tablets that are 4,000 years old. It's pretty amazing and impressive. And some of their manuscripts are the illuminated ones that have been hand-painted and handwritten. They're gorgeous. The next 3 are all citation management tools. So if you do decide you want to learn how to have your bibliography made for you, there's 1 week for each EndNote, Mendeley, and Zotero. Those are also in-person only because you do have to be using a computer to create your holdings, I guess. And you can't be doing that at the same time as you're watching a webinar. Program won't let you. October 27th, maximizing your research identity. I briefly touched on this. ORCID, Google Scholar, creating profiles and figuring out how to start having impact factor be a part of your research that you consider. November 3rd is open educational resources, basically free and affordable textbooks. So if you have a professor who has a very expensive textbook, AKA the sciences, chemistry and biology and physics and engineering, you might want to talk to them about going to this particular workshop. It's how to find really critical, peer-reviewed, good textbooks that are affordable and offered for free because academics have written them because they believe this is important. We did a survey last year of MU students and found that 67% of our students are not buying their textbook because it's too expensive and they can't afford it. That's a problem. So this is kind of how we're hoping to address that situation. November 10th, if you're teaching, this one's a good one. I've got a Teach putting together a syllabus. So it's a panel. We're having 4 different people from different departments across the MU community come and talk about how they put together a reading list and how they put together their syllabus. It also talks about how to make a reading list in Canvas that exports direct PDF links from the library. So it covers copyright and makes your reading list in Canvas, which is pretty cool. It's a new tool we got this semester. And the last one's a semester wrap-up, which I hope most of you can attend. We will be providing food at this one. And it's basically feedback for us. So it lets the librarians know what you got out of these sessions, what maybe you hope to get out and didn't, and we can change in the future, and just get a little bit of a follow-up study going. So I do have flyers if you want to take these with you. They're also online, and if you look at our blog, all of this information is there as well. So I am happy to take any questions, and I'll definitely stay after if you have questions to ask that way as well. Thanks for coming.